Alright, so in last week's video, Mariah and I had just rejected Tchaikovsky and gone back to our original offer on the first boat, Albinoni. On Sunday, I was able to move on board Albinoni, and here I am. I wanted to come through and check out the boat, make sure nothing had changed in the last month. They gave me an inventory sheet, so I was able to verify that everything that was supposed to be on board was on board. And even some things that weren't supposed to be on board, really cool, they actually threw them in. Dream Yachts has been pretty fantastic on hooking me up with all sorts of extra stuff that wasn't necessarily in our contract. So everything looked fine, and on Monday morning, Mariah went ahead and pulled the trigger and transferred all the money to the French bank account, and we bought the boat, but we didn't own it yet. And it was really anticlimactic because really, you know, it's a huge moment in our lives, and it was really disappointing that we weren't together for it. You know, I signed the bill of sale, the money was transferred, but there's more to it than that. There's a whole series of different bits of paperwork that need to be done. The boat has to be deregistered from France. It needs to be registered in the United States. The paperwork for the boat isn't actually here in Raiatea, it's actually at the customs office in Papeete, so it's 160 miles against the wind from here. And yeah, and then our broker who's doing all the paperwork is in France, and there's an 11-hour time difference. We're hoping to have paperwork done sometime early next week, but we don't actually own the boat yet. But I have three main priorities that I wanted to take care of before I left Raiatea. One, I wanted to get the solar panels working. Two, I needed to get a outboard and a dinghy. And then three, I needed to get the sails looked at. So yeah, I moved down to the boat on Monday, but I didn't own the boat, so I couldn't do anything destructive. But I could start at least evaluating the solar panels and figuring out what's going on with those. So I took off the old solar controller that was on here. It was kind of a crappy old Solera controller, and I brought a nice Victron unit from Hawaii and I installed that. And the nice thing about that Victron unit is it allows you to see both the real-time data and the history of what's been going on with the solar panels via the Bluetooth interface. So I went ahead and let that run for a full day on Monday. I disconnected the battery charger, I ran the batteries down to about 12.2 volts, and got let the solar controller do its thing. Unfortunately, these solar panels are in rough shape, and the panels are only putting out about 14.5 volts when they should be putting out 18 volts. And the Victron controller is a really good MPPT controller, but it actually doesn't even start charging until you get at least 5 volts above the battery voltage from the solar panels. So the panels all day long never got up to the 17.2 volts they would have needed in order to start charging. They're just worn out. And you know, the problem with these panels is, one, they're flexible panels, and flexible panels just they're never as efficient as rigid panels are. Two, they're 10 years old, and again, flexible panels don't have the longevity that the rigid panels have. I mean, my old panels on Bowron were over 15 years old and were giving out as good a power as the day I installed them. And then three, they're mounted to the top of the bimini, and I have 4 80-watt panels up there, so theoretically 320 watts of solar. But they're glued, you know, with 5200 or whatever, to the top of the bimini, which is great, keeps them nice and low profile. They're out of the way of the boom up there, but they get hot. They get smoking hot, and heat is the enemy of efficiency for solar panels. You really want them out on some sort of frame where they have airflow above and below to cool the panels down. So my panels weren't putting out any power at all. I mean, zero. You know, the Victron controller wouldn't charge with them. And so what I ended up doing, it was Tuesday night. I still didn't have confirmation that I owned the boat yet, but it wasn't too big of a deal if I went ahead and accessed the underside of the panels through the bimini, and I I went ahead and put each side, port and starboard, into series. So I have two 80-watt panels in series on both sides. Sets of panels are in parallel together going to the solar controller. The highest voltage that I ever saw from them was 31 volts when the batteries were completely topped and there was no voltage loss or drop from charging. But most of the time, actually, with the voltage drop from charging, even in series, those panels are actually still sitting down at about 16 to 20 volts. So they're putting out power, but they're tired. They're going to need to be replaced. Fortunately, they are putting out as much as 150 watts. You know, they're rated for 320. When that bright Tahitian sun hits them, they are still putting out some power. But if I had the opportunity, I would replace them. Problem is I'm in Utaroa, the second largest town in all of French Polynesia, and nobody sells solar panels here. They're just not available in any of the stores. I've been told they're probably available in Raiatea, but I haven't even been guaranteed that. So I don't even have the option of putting new panels on. I expected to be able to come down here and just go to any hardware store, pick up some panels and slap them on the roof, and would have been good with the new controller and called it good. But as it turns out, I'm going to have to make do with these panels that we have right now because I can't get anything else here. Maybe I'll replace them in Raiatea, but hopefully we'll have enough power to make the passage north, and I'll just replace them when I get up to Hawaii and actually have access to the exact panels that I want. Alright, so the next order of business was taking care of the sails. And that actually ended up being the easiest thing to take care of. I told Dofre, the manager at Dream Yachts, that I wanted to have a sailmaker go over the sails on Monday. Tuesday morning, in the pouring rain, the boys from the yard from Dream Yachts came in. They dropped the Genoa and they dropped the Jenniker, rolled them up, threw them in a van, and they took them off to the sailmaker for me. I didn't have to lift a finger, so pretty fantastic. When Mariah and I were test sailing this boat a month ago, we thought the Genoa was in really rough shape. When we were taking it down though, I was able to tell that the where I thought that both sails didn't have UV covers on them, it turns out that they actually have white UV covers, which is really rare and kind of a bad idea. Generally, in the States at least, and most places, seem to use Sunbrella for their UV covers, and they use a color so that when you roll up the sail, you can tell that all the white Dacron sailcloth is protected, and you just see the UV cover on the outside. And my old sails on Bowron, the UV cover came unstitched after about 7 years, and I had to redo the stitching. But when I sold the boat to Philippe a little over a year and a half ago, the UV cover is still in good shape, and it's been 13 years. Well, these sails are only 2 years old, and that white UV cover was shredded on both the foot and the leech. And so I thought that the sail was shredded. I thought it was sailcloth up there, but it turns out it was just a UV cover. And when we took the sails down, I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that the sailcloth is actually in good shape underneath there. So the sailmaker is going over and is going to put a new UV cover on both the foot and the leech of the Genoa, and then the Jenniker says actually looks pretty good and doesn't need it, and so he's just going to go over all the stitching on the Jenniker and the Genoa both and make sure they're in good shape and ready for the passage north. So that was a huge relief, and hopefully these sails are actually going to last us for years to come, as long as we don't mind sailing with kind of stretchy Dacron sails instead of some more performance laminate. Alright, so the last of my big three things I really needed to take care of before I could leave Raiatea was finding a dinghy and an outboard setup. There's no place that sells dinghies in Raiatea. Again, this is the second largest town in all of French Polynesia, and they don't sell dinghies here. They do have a small marine store that carries some marine stuff, but it's mainly fishing and diving. And so my surveyor had put me in touch with this guy named Lionel. And Lionel's a good long-term live aboard. He's from France, and he lives on his boat anchored out off the island here. And I'm sure he's got lots of side hustles, but one of them is taking old dinghies that are past their usable life. And what he does is he slices them open and inserts big excavator inner tubes, so big tractor style inner tubes, and then seals them back up with the valve stems sticking out. So what this basically does is takes an old Hypalon dinghy that doesn't hold air anymore and has been patched too many times to be repaired anymore, and gives it a new lease on life. The Hypalon tubes end up being just chafe guards and UV covers to protect the inner tube on the inside. And yeah, looks like it's gonna work, and I was able to find one cheap. And then most of all, beggars can't be choosers, and this is my only chance for a dinghy anywhere here on the island. I might be able to find one in Raiatea, but there's no guarantee of that, and if I did, it's probably going to be really expensive and not necessarily what I wanted. Naughty Sport, the marine store in town, is a Suzuki outboard dealer. I first put some people on it trying to find a used outboard, but no chance finding a used outboard anywhere here on the island. So I went ahead and was pricing out the Suzukis, and they didn't look too expensive. I mean, they were up there, but not outrageous. But Michael, the maintenance manager at Dream Yachts, was cool enough to go over and see what kind of discount he could get through Dream Yachts, and ended up being $700 off, which was fantastic. So Michael not only drove me over to pick up the outboard while I was inside paying, he took the outboard out and threw it in the van himself, and then took me to the gas station and mixed up the fuel for me, because Michael doesn't speak a lot of English, I don't speak much French, but he wanted to make sure that it was mixed to the proper 25-to-1 ratio while you're breaking in the engine. So he mixed the oil with the fuel for me and everything, and even helped me get the outboard down and onto the boat. So super awesome. All the guys at Dream Yachts have been really good to me so far, but it means that now I've got a kind of Frankensteinish 10-foot Carib and a brand new 15-horse Suzuki outboard to go on it. Alright, so by Thursday I'd taken care of my big 3 concerns. The sails were being taken care of, solar panels were working, I had a dinghy and outboard. Alright, so now it's time to start taking care of the rest of the little problems. The starter battery on the port side diesel ended up being the exact same model and make battery as the 3 house batteries up front, and so I went ahead and bought a brand new starting battery for that engine, and then moved the old battery up into the house bank. So the house bank before was a 375 amp house bank. Now I have a 500 amp house bank, which should be much nicer for the trip north. Cleaned the bilges, I cleaned the port side engine room. I haven't cleaned the starboard side yet. That was kind of a nasty job. But just been taking care of all sorts of little odds and ends around the boat. So I also end-for-ended the Genoa and the Jennifer halyards. So one of my big concerns, of course, is underway when we're sailing up to Hawaii. If you have one of your halyards chafe through, especially if it's a really important one like your jib or your main halyard, you're stuck. And this boat doesn't have setups for spare halyards. There's no spinnaker halyard that I could use in a pinch. I could possibly use a topping lift for a main halyard, but yeah, it'd be pretty tough. So anyway, the Genoa and the Jennifer halyard were both showing signs of chafe where they went over the sheave at the top of the mast. So I went ahead and spliced a long line onto the end of them, pulled them all the way through the mast, and then out the other side, undid the splice, put the splice on the other end, and pulled the line right back on through the other way, which gives you a nice fresh line over the top of the sheaves, and also all the line that used to be on the outside of the mast that was showing signs of UV degradation is now nice fresh line on the outside, and that UV degraded line is now living inside the mast where it's protected from the sun. So should hopefully get at least another couple of years actually out of those halyards, but at least we're going to get up to Hawaii with them the way that they are. Yesterday, Friday, they moved me outside of the marina to a dock that's kind of around the corner. rafted up to a big Lagoon 62 out here. There's actually been tied up to these Lagoon 62s most of the time that I've been here, and they just dwarf my boat. They make it look so small. You know, it's a 41-foot catamaran. It's not a small boat. It's huge compared to Bowron, to my old 32-foot monohull. But you know, especially looking at these masts are just massive compared to this boat, and these huge fly bridges that you know, almost come up to my first set of spreaders. These lagoons are actually normally running crude charters, and supposedly are never actually at the dock. They pick people up from the town dock in Utaroa and drop people off there again, and so they only come in for maintenance in theory. But because of COVID, there's no crude charters going on, and so they're taking up over half the dock space of Dream Yacht, so they're having to do this little shuffle around. So unfortunately, I don't have power out here where I'm at on the this outside lagoon area. But the water's cleaner, and I mean, the water's not bad inside, but there's good flow through here, and so I decided to go ahead and test the water maker. Now the good news is that the water maker, the feed pump and the high pressure pump are both working fine, and those are both expensive, especially that high pressure pump is a really high dollar item. Unfortunately, the membranes, it's got two membranes, and they seem to be compromised. It's ran it for about an hour, and it's putting out water that you could drink it. It probably wouldn't kill you, but it's pretty salty. And yeah, unfortunately, of course, it's a French-made water maker. It's an aqua base. There's no way to get those membranes here in French Polynesia, and due to COVID, there's no way to get them from France. Dauphré, the manager here, was saying that it would take at least 2 months, probably longer than that. So no chance of getting new membranes unless I'm able to source them somehow in Hawaii and get one of my crew members to come down. That would be fantastic. Alright, so my buddy Brandon is flying in tomorrow. He's actually on his flight from San Francisco to Raiatea right now. The plan is for the two of us to start working our way to Tahiti via Huahine first, which is just a half-day sail across the channel from here, and then probably an overnighter to Raiatea, and then it's just another quick trip from Raiatea across to Tahiti. So the idea will be to shake the boat down, but we need to wait for our paperwork to come through first, and hopefully that's going to come through early next week. We can't actually leave Raiatea until that comes through, but the boat needs to be shaken down, and you know, the words of Captain Ron, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen out there, and we're not going to figure out what this boat really needs sitting at the dock. So the plan is to get out there and make our way about 170 miles to windward to get to Raiatea, and see what happens along the way. But that's for the next video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.